Yes, wrestling might not be a legitimate sport, but it's just as dangerous, maybe even more so.
Oh my God almighty! Referee ought to stop this. She's out.
Injuries are not uncommon, even in WWE, and there have been some very serious ones that have ended careers, like in 2015, when Tyson Kidd was wrestling a match with Samoa Joe. This happened before Raw went on the air, but some fans in attendance did capture the fight on their phones. Everything seemed normal, and the match ended with Joe hitting his finisher, the Muscle Buster, and getting the win. Kidd laid motionless on the mat, and at first, it looked like he was just selling the move, but as WWE officials soon found out, Kidd wasn't acting. The finishing move seriously injured Tyson Kidd's neck and spine, and he was temporarily paralyzed. Thankfully, after being rushed to a hospital, Kidd recovered, although Tyson Kidd would never wrestle again. Currently, the Canadian wrestler is working for WWE as a producer. Paige is one of the most popular female stars in WWE history. She is a multi-time champion and is one of the key figures in the women's revolution. Sadly though, her career is plagued with issues, both in and outside of the ring. After being absent for over a year, Paige returned in November of 2017. She formed a faction with Mandy Rose and Sonya Deville called Absolution, and it seemed like Paige's career was getting back on track. Sadly, it would end about a month after she returned. While wrestling at a non-televised WWE event in Uniondale, New York, Paige was in the ring with Sasha Banks. The Boss kicked Paige in the back, and the anti-diva fell to the ground. Within seconds, it was clear that something wasn't right. Paige flared her arms wildly and was unable to stand up. The referee soon realized that Paige was legitimately hurt, and the match had to be stopped. Paige's fellow wrestlers watched on in horror as WWE's medical staff checked on Paige. Luckily, Paige did recover, but the accident nearly left her permanently paralyzed. It's not surprising then that this is the last time Paige would ever wrestle. In 2015, Seth Rollins was one of the biggest stars in WWE. He cashed in his Money in the Bank contract to win his first world championship at WrestleMania, and Rollins was being positioned to be WWE's next big star. However, while wrestling in Ireland, disaster struck. Seth Rollins was wrestling Kane in a no-holds-barred match and was attempting to flip over the Big Red Machine and powerbomb him through a table. Unfortunately, Rollins ended up landing awkwardly on his right leg, and it was clear he was in pain. Despite the injury, Seth Rollins continued with the match and even performed a pedigree on a chair. It turned out the WWE champion had torn his ACL, MCL, and meniscus due to the fall. This forced him to relinquish his WWE championship, ending his title reign at 220 days. Luckily, Rollins would make a recovery and returned at the 2016 Extreme Rules pay-per-view. Shortly after her very brief stint as Emelina, Emma found herself wrestling in Liverpool, England. She competed in a 6-woman tag team match, and one of her opponents was Sasha Banks. Banks set Emma up for her signature double knee stomp. Something went wrong though, and the impact caused Emma to injure her shoulder. At first, it didn't seem like anyone realized that Emma was injured. Sasha Banks eventually saw that Emma wasn't acting, and quickly went to cover her and finish the match. Even though they won, Emma's opponents had a hard time celebrating the victory, as they seemed more concerned about Emma. Luckily, after a few months on the sidelines, Emma did recover and returned to WWE. While wrestling in Australia, Xavier Woods and Big E faced off against the Revival. During the match, Woods and Dash Wilder were the legal participants. They performed a very fast-paced spot, and it sadly didn't go smoothly. Xavier flipped over Wilder and tore his Achilles tendon in his left leg. Woods tried to keep the match going, but almost instantly fell to the mat. The match stopped right away, and WWE staff quickly checked on Xavier Woods. After a few moments, Woods ended up being helped out of the ring. Big E grabbed a mic, and despite not having a tag team partner, decided to finish the match.
Hey, he's a fighter. He's gonna be okay, I assure you of that. But tonight, right here, right now, I'm gonna finish this. Let's go.
While Xavier Woods would be seen on TV, it would be nearly a year before Woods would wrestle again. After Raw went off the air in March of 2016, an 8-man tag team match featuring the Wyatt family took place. It was meant to just be a bit of fun for the fans in attendance, but it ended in tragedy. Luke Harper tagged into the match and began throwing fists. While attacking his opponent, the backwoods brawler fell and his leg bent really bad. Harper quickly tagged out with Bray Wyatt and rolled to the outside. Medical staff attended to him as the match continued in the ring. It turned out that Luke Harper dislocated his patella and tore his medial patellofemoral ligament. This forced him to miss WrestleMania and stay away from the ring for nearly 7 months.
Shane McMahon has survived some of the most insane WWE stunts of all time. This makes it all the more ironic when you see how he got injured. After disappearing for over a year, Shane O'Mac returned at WrestleMania 39. The host, Snoop Dogg, put Shane in an impromptu match against The Miz, which turned out to be a bad idea. Shane performed a leapfrog, but landed incorrectly and tore the quad muscle in his left leg. The unfortunate accident just goes to show how even a simple move can cause disastrous injuries. However, we're going to see some much more brutal and painful injuries later in this video. Right now, your test is to watch this next clip and not cringe. Warning, it's harder than it sounds. On April 1st, 2023, Indi Hartwell won her first singles championship in WWE when she captured the NXT Women's title. About 3 weeks later, Hartwell competed in only her second title defense, and unfortunately, it would be her last. Indi defended the title in a triple threat match against Tiffany Stratton and Roxanne Perez. During the match, Stratton hit a senton onto Indi and Roxanne. Perez was fine, but Indi Hartwell's right leg got crushed due to how it was positioned. Boy, does that look painful. The injury was so severe that Indi Hartwell was taken out of the match. However, she did return later for the finish. While Indi did win the match, she was forced to relinquish the title and has spent 3 months on the sidelines healing. Now, if blood is not your thing, do not watch this next clip. The main event of Backlash 2023 pitted Brock Lesnar against Cody Rhodes. Like a lot of his opponents, Brock manhandled the American Nightmare. However, it was actually the Beast that got busted open. Thinking fast, Cody Rhodes dodged Brock's assault, causing Lesnar to hit an exposed turnbuckle. Brock's face immediately started to gush blood, and things only got bloodier and messier as the match wore on. By the end, it looked like Brock Lesnar had been in a slasher film. While it looked nasty, Brock wasn't seriously hurt. The same could not be said for what happened to Charlotte Flair. In December 2023, Charlotte Flair was fighting Asuka on SmackDown. Right before the show returned from a commercial break, the Queen and the Empress were doing a spot on the top rope. Unfortunately, they lost balance and Charlotte's head landed on the mat. Despite how brutal the accident was, Flair continued the match and finished it. However, medical staff checked Charlotte out afterwards, and Flair spent a few moments in the ring before she could safely move to the back. It's not clear what the exact injury was, but it appears that Flair hurt her knee. In any case, the Queen was pulled from all of her upcoming matches following the accident. While that was ugly, the referee did not throw up the infamous X signal. However, the referee in this next clip did. Sometimes, it's the things that don't look like they hurt that cause the most damage. In July 2023, WWE is hosting a non-televised show in Salisbury, Maryland. One of the matches was a fatal four-way contest for the women's championship. Bayley was one of the competitors, but during the match, she accidentally ran into Asuka. While it didn't look serious, Bayley crumbled to the mat, and the referee soon threw up the X to signal that it was a real injury. Bayley was taken to the outside and didn't continue the match. It was soon discovered that Bayley had injured her right knee, which put her out of action for a month. While that was unfortunate, the injury this next wrestler sustained kept him out of action for over 5 times as long. On a March 2023 episode of SmackDown, a massive confrontation took place that involved Drew McIntyre, LA Knight, Sheamus, and The New Day. Kofi Kingston, Xavier Woods, and Knight ended up on the outside, so Drew decided to take a dive. However, the 3 men were not positioned correctly, and Kofi took the brunt of the impact. While Drew was safe, Kingston wasn't so lucky. Kofi's ankle got injured as a result and actually required surgery. The accident caused Kofi Kingston to miss 5 months of action, and because of that, he missed out on a huge payday at WrestleMania. Speaking of which, one WrestleMania injury was so severe that it required 14 staples to close the wound. One of the biggest matches at WrestleMania 39 was Edge and Finn Balor's Hell in a Cell match. Hell was definitely the right word, as Finn Balor would suffer an injury so brutal, the match had to be stopped. After going at it for nearly 10 minutes, Edge threw a ladder at the Demon.
No doubt about it. The Pioneer! God almighty!
The impact caused Finn Balor's head to get busted open, and paramedics had to get in and check on Finn immediately. The injury only got worse and worse as the match progressed, but the full extent wouldn't be realized until afterwards. The cut on Balor's head required 14 staples to close. Finn decided to make lemonade out of lemons and made a t-shirt that highlighted the 14 staples he needed. Besides Owen Hart's 316 shirt, I think this is the only time a WWE injury has gotten merchandise. Now, what could be worse than one wrestler getting injured in a match? How about 2 wrestlers gained injuries in the same match. In May 2023, Bayley and Dakota Kai fought Raquel Rodriguez and Liv Morgan in a tag team match on SmackDown. Considering how many people got hurt, this arguably was the most dangerous match of the year. First, Dakota Kai tore her ACL when she performed a tag team move with Bayley. Instantly, it was clear that Kai got injured.
Instincts of Bayley really come to the fore. Oh my goodness! Dakota Kai!
Unfortunately, Dakota wasn't the only woman who was hurt. During a commercial break, Dakota Kai kicked Liv Morgan in the corner. It didn't look like it, but the move actually injured Morgan's shoulder. Liv thankfully wasn't out of action for too long. However, Dakota Kai's injury was much more serious. While she did continue to appear on TV, Kai wasn't medically cleared for the remainder of 2023. Now, normally the only people that get hurt in this type of video are the wrestlers. However, in this next clip, not only were the wrestlers hurt, but so was the ring. On the December 12th, 2023 episode of NXT, Dijak and Eddie Thorpe were scheduled to have a match. However, the two started fighting before the bell even rang. Once the match did officially start, it took less than a minute for the two to ram into the ring post and bust off the top turnbuckle. The steel from the turnbuckle took a bite out of both Dijak and Thorpe and left both of them bloody. However, Dijak definitely got the worst of it. While it looked bad, it wasn't anything that was going to keep the two men out of the ring. This next wrestler, though, wasn't so lucky. In July 2023 on SmackDown, Pretty Deadly took on the Brawling Brutes in a tag team match. Elton Prince tagged in and immediately got pounced by Ridge Holland. However, Prince over-rotated and ended up landing incorrectly and separating his shoulder. Despite this, Elton finished the match and even got the win for his team. The injury, though, kept Elton Prince out of the ring, but he did continue to appear on TV. I'm starting to think there was a curse against tag team matches on SmackDown in 2023. 2 weeks after Elton Prince's injury and 11 weeks after Dakota Kai and Liv Morgan's, another wrestler got put on the hurt list. However, this time, the wrestler actually injured herself. Charlotte Flair and Bianca Belair teamed up to take on Chelsea Green and Sonya Deville. About 3 minutes into the contest, Deville nailed Belair with a kick. However, Sonya planted her right foot incorrectly, which caused her to tear her ACL. Unfortunately, Deville would stay out of action for the rest of 2023. Now, if you wrestled in a WWE match, chances are what happened to this guy's body is what would happen to yours. Bad Bunny had a bad time when he fought Damian Priest in a street fight. The match had a lot of big moments and used a number of weapons. While nothing went wrong, the match did literally leave its mark on Bunny. Afterward, the rapper shared all the scars and bruises that were left on his body. To be clear, Damian Priest wasn't taking liberties with Bad Bunny. The reason you don't often see WWE wrestlers with this kind of damage after matches is that their bodies have built up calluses due to them wrestling every week. However, the simplest mistake can lead to a pretty bad injury, as we're going to see in this next clip. I guess it shouldn't be too surprising that someone got injured during a street fight. You would think it would be due to a steel chair, a table, a ladder, or some other foreign object, but nah. At Payback 2023, Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn took on Damian Priest and Finn Balor in a street fight. Since there were no rules, Dominic Mysterio interfered to help his Judgment Day brothers. However, as Dom was throwing fists, his elbow caught Kevin Owens in the head. After the accident, KO quickly sported a crimson mask. Luckily though, the injury wasn't anything too serious, and it actually kind of worked for the match. Usually when a wrestler gets injured, it's a combination of them and their opponent messing up a move. However, wrestling is so dangerous that wrestlers have accidentally injured themselves. Randy Orton did this live on pay-per-view. At Over the Limit 2010, former tag team partners Edge and Randy Orton came face to face. The match was going smoothly and everything was normal. Then, Randy Orton started doing his signature pounding on the mat, and suddenly, the Viper's right arm went limp. It looked pretty bad, as Randy's arm dangled lifelessly from his body. It was later discovered that Orton suffered a separated shoulder. Now, it's believed that Randy Orton had done some damage earlier in the match. However, the pounding on the mat is what finally caused the Apex Predator's shoulder to separate. Regardless, the injury made Orton unable to use his right arm, and the match ended moments after the injury when both Randy and Edge were counted out. In October 2007, John Cena was ready to compete against Mr. Kennedy. Unfortunately, shortly after the match started, Cena got injured. The leader of the C Nation performed a hip toss on his opponent, but in doing so, tore his pectoral muscle off his shoulder. You can tell John Cena was in pain afterward, but he still continued the match. Not only that, but after winning, Randy Orton attacked him, causing a post-match brawl. The injury forced John Cena out of action for the rest of the year, but he would make a surprise comeback at the 2008 Royal Rumble. Triple H nearly ended his own career with a simple accident. During a Raw main event, the game teamed up with Stone Cold Steve Austin and took on Chris Jericho and Chris Benoit. Both teams threw everything they had at each other
together, and it was a very hard-hitting match. At one point, Y2J had Austin in the walls of Jericho, but Triple H managed to break up the submission hold. When doing this, Triple H planted his leg incorrectly and caused his left quadricep muscle to tear. Despite the incredible pain, Triple H continued and was even put in the walls of Jericho. The injury put the game out of action for months, but he was eventually able to return on January 7th, 2002. In a very scary coincidence, Triple H injured himself again exactly 5 years after his comeback. While wrestling in another tag team match, this time teaming with Shawn Michaels against Randy Orton and Edge, Triple H performed a spine buster. In doing so, the Cerebral Assassin tore his right quadricep. It was immediately clear that the game was hurt, and the match began to fall apart. However, Triple H did his best to keep going, and the other men eventually got things back on track. Unfortunately for the game though, he'd be out of action for several months, but did make a comeback later in the year. Brock Lesnar's first WrestleMania match was almost his last. The Beast was going up against Kurt Angle in the main event of the show. Because of their legit wrestling backgrounds, the two had an extremely intense and physical match. Lesnar and Angle gave everything they had, and I do mean everything. To close out the match, the Beast was going to perform a shooting star press. Now, Brock Lesnar had done this move earlier in his career, but had never performed it while on WWE's main roster. It sounded like a great way to finish Brock's WrestleMania debut, but it almost cost him his life. Brock Lesnar didn't get enough momentum and landed on his head and neck. This was mainly due to how exhausted Brock was by this point in the match. Somehow, Lesnar avoided being paralyzed for life, but gave himself a concussion due to the botch. Mick Foley's legendary and violent match with Triple H at the 2000 Royal Rumble was supposed to be his last. However, a few months later, Foley laced up his boots again for another match, but he probably shouldn't have. At WrestleMania 2000, Foley took on Triple H, The Rock, and The Big Show in an elimination match for the WWE Championship. During the fight, Foley got on the middle rope and tried to land an elbow drop on Rock. However, Foley completely missed and instead slammed his rib into the edge of the table. The Hardcore Legend was eliminated shortly thereafter, and Foley never wrestled again, at least for 4 years. On an episode of Raw in 2002, the main event was a 10-man tag team match. One of those 10 men was Kevin Nash, who had just returned from an injury. The match went on for a while, but finally Nash got tagged in and was a house of fire. But then this happened. Big Sexy tore his left quadricep just by running in the ring. The other wrestlers quickly knew that something had happened and filled the ring to distract the fans. The injury was so severe, it forced Kevin Nash to stay out of action for 9 months. While it was a serious injury, Nash himself has joked about the accident, and it's become a meme in the wrestling community. In the build-up to NXT TakeOver 30, Johnny Gargano took on Ridge Holland in a North American Championship qualifying match. Thanks to the size difference, Holland was able to manhandle Gargano, which led to a terrifying accident. At one point, Ridge Holland went to hit Johnny Gargano with a power slam. However, the move wasn't performed correctly, and Gargano's head came crashing down on the mat. Medical personnel immediately came to check on Johnny, but since the match wasn't airing live, that was completely cut out. After being cleared, Gargano and Ridge continued their match, and Johnny Wrestling picked up the win. The November 30th episode of Raw kicked off with Jeff Hardy and Elias going at it in a Symphony of Destruction match. The ring was surrounded by musical equipment, and, as you would expect, a lot of it got destroyed. After Elias accidentally electrocuted himself, Jeff Hardy got the upper hand and set the Drifter on a table. To finish off his opponent, the charismatic Enigma got on top of the ring post and hit a Swanton Bomb. The table was too close to the ring steps though, and Jeff's head hit the steel on the way down. Luckily, it looked like Elias and the table prevented the accident from being much worse. It was also reported after the match that Jeff Hardy wasn't seriously injured. Way back in January, Rey Mysterio and Andrade faced off in a ladder match for the United States Championship. Ladder matches are dangerous already, and this one showed exactly why. When Mysterio went to grab the title, Andrade moved the ladder away, leaving Rey to dangle. It looked like Rey Mysterio was going to try and hit Andrade with a Hurricane Rana, but he instead fell straight down. Thankfully, Rey got up right away, but you could tell the masked luchador wasn't 100%. Mysterio was able to finish the match, even though he ended up losing to Andrade. It was bad enough that WrestleMania this year didn't have any fans in attendance, but it was even worse for Jimmy Uso. Uso competed in a triple threat ladder match along with John Morrison and Kofi Kingston for the SmackDown Tag Team titles. Within the first minute of the match, all three men brought ladders into the ring and tried to grab the belts. Morrison tipped Jimmy's ladder over, and the impact from the fall caused Jimmy Uso to tear his ACL. Despite the seriousness of the injury, Jimmy continued to wrestle for another 17 minutes until the bell rang. Unfortunately, while Jimmy has returned to WWE, he has not wrestled since that match. Hopefully we'll see him back in the ring soon. Natalya, Tamina, and Liv Morgan had a huge opportunity when they competed in a triple threat match for a spot on the Women's SmackDown Survivor Series team. At the last moment, it was announced the match had become a fatal four-way, with Chelsea Green being added. This was also the Canadian native's debut on SmackDown, but unfortunately, it ended horribly. Less than a minute into the match, Green got kicked off the ring apron by Liv Morgan. When she hit the floor, the impact caused Chelsea to break her left wrist. She didn't do anything for the remainder of the match, most likely because of the injury. Green has undergone surgery, but there's currently no news on when she'll be back in the ring. After making a huge return at the Royal Rumble and defeating his former tag team partner at WrestleMania, Edge agreed to have a rematch against Randy Orton at Backlash. Like all of WWE's shows at the time, Edge and Orton's match was pre-taped. However, to live up to the tagline of greatest wrestling match ever, WWE wanted to reshoot some portions of Edge and Randy Orton's bout. It was during the second round of filming that the Rated R superstar suffered torn triceps. The filming stopped after Edge was injured, and it's reported that WWE cut out the moment the injury happened. However, some fans did notice a concerning bruise on the Canadian wrestler's right arm. It's estimated the tricep tear sidelined Edge for 6 to 8 months, but hopefully we'll see Edge back in WWE in 2021. At the start of 2020, Samoa Joe and Kevin Owens both had the opportunity to win some gold when they received a Raw Tag Team Championship match against Seth Rollins and Murphy. Things were looking good for KO and the Samoan Submission Machine until Joe performed a suicide dive. Samoa Joe's head landed hard on the floor and caused him to suffer a concussion. Joe was taken backstage, leaving Kevin Owens to finish the match with Rollins and Murphy. Unsurprisingly, KO lost. Unfortunately, about a month later, Samoa Joe would suffer another head injury while filming a WWE commercial. This forced Joe to take a break from wrestling and transition into being a commentator. The 2004 Royal Rumble was going pretty smoothly until the final 10 minutes. The remaining 5 wrestlers formed an alliance to try and eliminate the Big Show. They threw everything they had, but this only angered the Giant. Show eventually fought back and used his monstrous strength to catapult John Cena over the top rope. The future 16-time world champion bent his knee awkwardly when he landed, and it resulted in him tearing his MCL. Even though he had to wear a knee brace for a while and was temporarily limited with what he could do in the ring, Cena continued to compete, even appearing on SmackDown only 5 days after his injury. I guess that's why he's called the Champ. The 2008 Royal Rumble was kind of a big deal. It was held in Madison Square Garden, Michael Buffer was the guest announcer. It was the first WWE pay-per-view in HD, and Shawn Michaels and Undertaker were the first 2 entrants. Everything was fine, until the 4th participant, Hardcore Holly, got into the ring. Michaels was lying on the mat, so Holly decided to assault him with a few stomps. Pretty normal wrestling stuff. But one of those boots lands straight on HBK's face. After laying low for a short while, the showstopper got back into the action. At first it didn't look so bad, but that changed pretty quickly as blood began to pour from Shawn Michaels' nose. Even with this, Michaels continued wrestling for roughly half an hour before being eliminated, all with a bloody and probably broken nose. It's interesting looking back at CM Punk's final days in WWE, now that we have insight into what was going on. When the Voice of the Voiceless entered the 2014 Royal Rumble, he was upset with things backstage and was also suffering from a staph infection, so before the bell even run, Punk was not in the best place. This is made even worse when the number 8 entrant, Kofi Kingston, got into the ring. In signature fashion, Kofi got started by hitting a clothesline, and while it may have looked normal, CM Punk later revealed that he actually got a concussion from it. To make matters worse, Punk wrestled for another 40 minutes before being eliminated, and also received a chokeslam from Kane through one of the announcers' tables. I can't speak for the man, but I'm guessing he isn't too fond of this night. Apparently, Madison Square Garden has a history of injuries during the Royal Rumble, as another wrestler got seriously hurt back in 2000. Even though they weren't official participants in the match, that didn't stop the tag team of Funaki and Taka Michinoku from getting involved. They rushed into the ring, but were quickly thrown out by the actual competitors. After some time had passed, they returned for a second attempt, with history mostly repeating itself, until the very end. Taka Michinoku went over the top rope with too much momentum, and he ended up smacking his head on the floor. He reportedly suffered a concussion and separated shoulder, and didn't appear again for the rest of the night. If that wasn't bad enough, it looks like some blood even squirts from his nose upon impact. Michinoku was out of action for a while, but he managed to recover in time for WrestleMania, and is still performing today.
I'm really surprised this guy didn't rip off his arm. At Stand and Deliver in April 2022, Grayson Waller was one of 5 participants in a ladder match for the North American Championship. It's not too surprising, but unfortunately, someone did get hurt, and that person was Grayson Waller. After the match, Grayson Waller was seen wearing an arm brace, proving that he didn't walk out unscathed. Be prepared to cringe in 3, 2... During a 6-woman tag team match on Raw, Becky Lynch started messing with her opponent, Bianca Belair's hair. As you just saw, it didn't work out well for Becky. Moments after the hair whip, a huge red mark formed on Lynch's stomach. It didn't put Becky Lynch out of action, but that had to hurt. The next time Becky and Bianca would face off in the ring was at WrestleMania 38. Unfortunately, someone suffered a nasty injury during this match too. At one point, it looked like Becky was trying to perform a vertical senton. Something was off, and the only thing that connected was Becky Lynch's boot with Bianca Belair's face. Despite the painful accident, Belair continued the match and ended up winning the Raw Women's Championship. It looked like Bianca was fine, but the next night on Raw, we saw just how extensive Belair's injury was. Her left eye looked terrible, but despite that, Bianca Belair was still in good spirits. Hopefully this doesn't mean that 2022 is cursed, but the very first WWE match of the year had someone getting injured. Cesaro and Ricochet were facing off against Sheamus and Ridge Holland during the Day 1 kickoff show. Only about a minute into the match, and Cesaro flipped Ricochet onto Ridge Holland. Unfortunately, Ricochet's boot landed on Holland's face. Ridge soon tagged out and wasn't seen for the rest of the match. We learned later that the botched move broke Ridge Holland's nose. Thankfully, it wasn't too serious, and Ridge Holland was wrestling again soon. But in a scary coincidence, Ridge would later botch a move that could have ended someone's career. While teaming with Sheamus, Ridge Holland was in a match with Kofi Kingston and Big E. Holland and Big E were fighting on the outside, leading to Ridge hitting E with an overhead belly-to-belly suplex. Big E didn't get high enough, causing his head to land on the floor. It was incredibly scary to see, and the accident caused Big E to break his neck. After getting medical attention, it was thankfully discovered that Big E's spinal cord wasn't injured and he would not need surgery. However, as of right now, E has not wrestled since that match. Drew McIntyre began 2022 by feuding with Happy Corbin and Madcap Moss. Their rivalry went on for a few months and included a match at Elimination Chamber. At the event, McIntyre took on Moss in a Falls Count Anywhere match. Even though they could fight anywhere, the most painful moment of the match actually happened in the ring. The match had only been going on for a few minutes when Drew McIntyre planned Madcap Moss with an Alabama slam. Something went wrong because Madcap landed headfirst on the mat. The most shocking part is that Madcap Moss walked it off and continued the match like the whole thing didn't happen. In his WrestleMania debut, Rick Boogs had the huge honor of being part of the opening match. Boogs teamed up with Shinsuke Nakamura to challenge the SmackDown Tag Team Champions, the Usos. Shinsuke started the match, but after a bit of fighting, tagged out with Rick Boogs. Rick was running wild, but his rampage came to an abrupt stop when his knee suddenly gave out when he lifted both Usos on his back. Rick Boogs quickly tagged out with Nakamura. It turned out that Boogs tore his quadricep and hasn't been in action since the injury. In February 2022, Randy Orton and Matt Riddle found themselves in a tag team match against the Street Profits on Raw. The match was going smoothly until the finish. Montez Ford performed his signature frog splash on Orton, but Ford's position was off and he landed on Randy's shoulder. The Viper was clearly in pain after the botched move, but thankfully it wasn't anything serious. The idea of wrestling is that you don't actually hit each other, but sometimes mistakes happen, and they can be quite bloody. On SmackDown, Natalya took on Shayna Baszler in a one-on-one match, but Ronda Rousey was in Baszler's corner. Baszler didn't need any help though, as she's able to beat her opponent on her own. After the match though, Rousey told Shayna the job wasn't finished yet, leading to the Queen of Spades nailing Natalya with a knee to the face. The move actually did connect though, and Natalya's nose was broken and bleeding. Unfortunately, the accident actually dislocated Natalya's nose and it required her to undergo surgery. SummerSlam 2022 kicked off with Becky Lynch challenging Bianca Belair for the Raw Women's Championship, which was a rematch from WrestleMania 38, which was a rematch from the previous year's SummerSlam. However, only about 3 minutes into it, Becky fell on her right shoulder. The landing caused Lynch's shoulder to pop out of its socket, and it was clear Becky was in pain as she kept checking on it throughout the match. The injury became more and more visible as the match progressed, but Lynch didn't let it stop her, and she got the job done. In November 2022, R-Truth wrestled his first match on NXT since 2011, but it turned out to be a bad decision. During the match, Truth performed a somersault to his opponent on the outside. Truth clipped the top rope though and didn't jump far enough, causing him to crash hard onto the floor. The former 24/7 champion grabbed his left leg, and the referee soon called off the match, and R-Truth was helped backstage. It was later found out that the accident tore Truth's quad, and he needed to undergo surgery. One of the defining images of 2022 was Cody Rhodes' gruesome, torn pectoral muscle. But how did he actually get injured? On the Raw before Cody's Hell in a Cell match with Seth Rollins, Rhodes and Rollins got into a brawl. During the fight, Cody tore his right pectoral tendon. That was bad enough, but a few days later, while weight training, Rhodes tore the tendon completely off the bone. That's why the injury looked so bad when fans saw it at Hell in a Cell. Additionally, the reason WWE allowed Cody Rhodes to wrestle was that he couldn't do any more damage. Nevertheless, the injury sidelined Cody Rhodes for the rest of the year. This injury was pretty unique. On Raw in June 2022, Alexa Bliss, Liv Morgan, Rhea Ripley, and Doudrop fought in a fatal four-way match. The winner got to face Bianca Belair at Money in the Bank for the Raw Women's Championship. At one point in the match, Morgan gave Bliss a kick to the gut, which caused Alexa to DDT Ripley. What actually hurt Rhea though was her own knee. Ripley's boot got caught on the rope, which caused her face to collide with her leg. It didn't seem so bad until Rhea Ripley shared a picture of the damage the accident caused to her mouth. On top of that, the injury also gave Ripley a concussion. Thankfully, after about a month on the sidelines, Rhea was back in action. Not all WWE injuries happened on TV. During a triple threat match at a non-televised WWE show, Carmella, Asuka, and Bianca Belair all faced off for the Raw Women's title. As the match was starting to come to the end, Carmella tried to pull a fast one on Belair by attacking her from behind. Bianca got out of harm's way with a backflip, but Carmella immediately crumbled to the mat and went outside of the ring. It appears their timing was off, and Belair's tailbone smacked Carmella's head. An image was later shared on social media showing exactly the damage the botch move did to Mella. Whenever weapons get involved, it's very easy for a wrestler to get hurt, and we witnessed this on SmackDown in August 2022. In the lead up to his match against Roman Reigns at Clash at the Castle, McIntyre took on Honoré Uce, Sami Zayn. McIntyre won the match, but he didn't end the night on a high note. Roman and the Usos came in and attacked the Scottish Warrior. They battered McIntyre with chairs and threw his body all around the ringside area. You could already see marks forming on Drew's body, but up-close pictures taken backstage showed just how much damage the beatdown did to McIntyre. You know an injury is bad when the match is immediately stopped and the referee throws up the X sign. Unfortunately, that's what happened in the main event of NXT UK in February 2022. Blair Davenport and Meiko Satomura fought in a Japanese street fight. Despite the match type, the injury was not caused by any weapon. Davenport jumped from the top turnbuckle and hit Satomura with a stomp to the back. Blair landed awkwardly on her left foot and began shouting in pain. Within seconds, the referee called for the bell and gave the X sign, signaling that this injury was real. The landing hurt Blair's left ankle, but thankfully, after being out of action for about 4 months, Blair was able to return to the ring. Ladder matches are some of the most brutal matches WWE puts on each year, and the 2022 Women's Money in the Bank was no exception. One of the participants was Shotzi, who had a rough night. She had a few mistakes during the match, but the worst was when she went for a senton. Shotzi performed the move from the top rope, but ended up hitting the ladder below. It appears her back and or head got clipped by the ladder on the way down. In any case, the move did bust Shotzi open, as evident by the blood on her face. Charlie Haas' signature entrance involved him running as fast as he could into the ring, then bouncing off the ropes. Unfortunately, this caused an accident on one episode of Raw. While making his entrance for a match against Johnny Nitro, Haas ran into the ring and accidentally knocked the ring announcer, Lilian Garcia, off the edge.
Former Seton Hall University All-American.
The fall injured Garcia and sprained her wrist. She was helped backstage, and someone else took over re-announcing for the rest of the show. Luckily, Lilian was back on Raw the next week, and WWE actually turned the accident into a storyline. The Money in the Bank ladder match is the embodiment of chaos. It's no surprise that the wrestlers get hurt, but unfortunately, in 2019, some innocent bystanders got injured. Mustafa Ali was about to grab the briefcase when Brock Lesnar's music hit and the Beast came running towards the ring. As Brock did this, he knocked
knocked over a ladder that accidentally hit some nearby cameramen. One of them actually got injured and had to stop filming. Clearly, nobody is safe from Brock Lesnar. Before their match at WrestleMania, Roman Reigns and Triple H had an all-out brawl on Raw. They fought all over the arena and eventually ended up backstage. During the chaos, the game threw a production box on the floor that accidentally hit a referee. It might seem like nothing, but the object did some pretty bad damage to the ref's leg, as he immediately started hopping and wasn't seen for the rest of the segment. The extent of the injury was revealed afterward, as the referee needed stitches where the box hit him. Sheamus competed in his first pay-per-view match at the 2009 Survivor Series. Sadly, the big moment was overshadowed by a bad accident. The Celtic Warrior was part of a 5-on-5 elimination tag team match. At one point, Sheamus ran into the ring to break up a pinfall. Unfortunately, as he did this, the Celtic Warrior accidentally hit the back of the referee's head with his knee. The ref laid on the ground and put up the X sign, which is the signal that someone is hurt for real. A second referee soon came out to officiate the match, while the first ref was taken backstage to get medical help. Thankfully, he recovered and was back to officiating WWE matches soon. Another dangerous WWE match is the Elimination Chamber. Batista was one of the wrestlers in the 2005 Chamber match and was one of the last people to enter. When the Animals pod opened, Batista went on a rampage and destroyed the other wrestlers. Batista went to throw Chris Jericho out of the ring, but didn't see where he was throwing Y2J and accidentally took out a cameraman. The WWE employee was down, and referees soon opened the chamber and got him out of there. The match continued, and luckily, no other bystanders were hurt. One of the most violent matches in WWE history was between Randy Orton and Mick Foley. Not only did Orton and Foley get hurt, but so did the referee. Anything was legal during the match, and both men made sure to utilize that rule. The ring became filled with weapons, which included thumbtacks. After hitting Foley with the RKO, Orton went to cover the Hardcore Legend. The referee counted the pin, but accidentally hit some tacks while he was doing his job. Fans could see the official tense up as soon as his hand hit the mat. Of course, this wasn't a serious injury, but it had to hurt. One of the greatest main events in WrestleMania history was between Randy Orton, Batista, and Daniel Bryan. All three men put on a great match, but unfortunately, not everything went smoothly. Being former teammates, Orton and Batista decided to work together and beat up Bryan. The Animal gave Daniel Bryan a powerbomb, while Orton caught Daniel with an inverted RKO. The Viper accidentally landed on a TV monitor that was lying on the floor, and the way he reacts tells you just how badly it hurt. The Apex Predator was thankfully able to finish the match and didn't have any serious post-match injuries. D-Generation X and the Hart Foundation had an epic feud in the late 90s. This resulted in Triple H and Owen Hart fighting each other at WrestleMania 14. Even though the match featured two of the best wrestlers of all time, it did have a pretty bad accident. Triple H went to block a move from Hart by sticking up his boot, but Owen's face got kicked. It was so bad that Owen Hart actually broke his nose, which got worse as the match went on. Later that same night, the New Age Outlaws took on Terry Funk and Cactus Jack in a dumpster match. The only way to win was to throw both opponents into a dumpster. The Outlaws did just that and powerbombed Funk into the trash receptacle. However, Billy Gunn's position was off and Terry Funk's back hit the side of the dumpster when he went falling in. The severity of the injury was made clear when fans saw the bruise that had formed on Funk's back. In the main event of WrestleMania 16, Triple H, The Rock, Big Show, and Mick Foley wrestled in a fatal four-way elimination match for the WWE Championship. After eliminating Big Show, it was down to Rock, H, and Foley. Triple H got The Rock onto the announcer's table, allowing Mick Foley to hit an elbow drop from the middle rope. Unfortunately, Foley didn't make it and hit the side of the table. In addition to being extremely painful, Foley also had the wind knocked out of him. Mick Foley is one of the toughest human beings on earth though, so of course, he was able to continue wrestling. WrestleMania 31 opened with a ladder match for the Intercontinental Championship. Of course, this type of match is pretty dangerous, and so it's no surprise that someone got hurt. Luke Harper powerbombed Dean Ambrose out of the ring and onto a ladder. Due to the way Ambrose landed, he suffered a nasty gash on the back of his head. Ambrose was taken out of the match right away, and medical staff quickly took care of him. While it was a nasty move, Dean Ambrose was okay and able to wrestle the next night. Shawn Michaels vs. The Undertaker at WrestleMania 25 is easily a contender for greatest WWE match of all time. The match was perfect, except for one botch that nearly killed The Undertaker. Michaels was on the outside, so Undertaker dove over the top rope, but ended up hitting the cameraman instead. This was all planned. The cameraman was actually a WWE wrestler in disguise named Sim Snuka. He was supposed to catch Undertaker, but failed. This accident gave The Undertaker a concussion, as well as several fractures. Like the professional he
is, Undertaker didn't let that stop him, and he finished the match with HBK. John Cena walked into WrestleMania 27 looking to win the WWE Championship. The champion, The Miz, wasn't going down easily, and the two men went all out. During the fight, The Miz ended up in the timekeeper's area. Cena saw an opportunity and clotheslined his opponent over the barricade. Since they were outside of the barricaded area, there was no padding, so The Miz landed on solid concrete. When Miz hit the hard surface, it actually gave him a concussion. While he managed to recover, The Miz sadly doesn't remember his WrestleMania match with Cena because of the injury. In 2009, Jeff Hardy and Edge faced off in a ladder match with the World Heavyweight Championship on the line. It was an awesome fight, but unfortunately, it wasn't without issues. Hardy and Edge had been wrestling for a while and ended up on a ladder that was outside of the ring. The structure tipped over, and both men went crashing through a second ladder. Unfortunately, the charismatic Enigma overshot it and ended up landing on the floor. The fall injured Jeff Hardy's shoulder, but he was able to continue the match. Say what you will about Brock Lesnar, the guy can hurt you for real. After a long absence from WWE, Lesnar made his in-ring return at the 2012 Extreme Rules. His opponent was John Cena, and in less than 30 seconds, Brock had busted Cena's head wide open. It was so bad that the match had to be stopped temporarily. Lesnar was so reckless during the match, he ended up hurting himself too. Later on, the Beast dove at John Cena and ended up flipping out of the ring and onto the floor. Brock looked like he hurt his knee, but both wrestlers were able to keep fighting and finish the match. This next injury shows how dangerous wrestling can be, even if you aren't involved in the match. The 2011 Extreme Rules was a big moment. After Edge vacated the World Heavyweight Championship, Christian and Alberto Del Rio fought to become the new champion. It looked like Captain Charisma was about to grab the title until Del Rio's bodyguard, Brodus Clay, ran in. Christian managed to get the better of Brodus and throw a ladder into his face. Unfortunately, the weapon busted open Brodus Clay's head. Luckily, it wasn't too serious, and Clay was ready to get back to work very soon. Even dead man bleeds. In 2019, The Undertaker made a rare appearance at Extreme Rules, teaming up with Roman Reigns to take on Shane McMahon and Drew McIntyre. The tag team match was nothing short of chaos, and it only got worse when Elias ran in and smashed a guitar into Undertaker's back. Unfortunately, splinters from the wooden guitar got stuck in Undertaker's skin. It was made clear that something went wrong as blood began to pour from the Phenom's back. Thankfully, it wasn't anything the dead man couldn't handle, and he got the last laugh when he tombstone piledrived Shane McMahon and won the match. Usually, a wrestler gets injured once the match starts, not during their entrance, but Goldberg isn't like most wrestlers. In 2017, Goldberg was making his usual hyped up entrance on Raw. However, fans quickly noticed that the wrestling legend had a cut on his head. How did this happen? Before Goldberg would walk out, he had a ritual of headbutting a locker room door to get himself pumped up. During this particular entrance, the door fought back and busted the Master of the Jackhammer open. The WWE Hall of Famer had to cut an entire promo with blood dripping from his head, and that's why Goldberg doesn't headbutt himself anymore. Triple H is the king of entrances, especially when it comes to WrestleMania. The game always steps it up. However, in 2013, Triple H went too far and got a painful injury because of it. At WrestleMania 29, the King of Kings made an epic introduction by walking through a cloud of smoke created by dry ice. Unfortunately, the ice got sprayed onto Triple H's stomach. If you've never touched dry ice before, it's similar to burning yourself when you touch something extremely hot. Just imagine what that would feel like on your body. Not only did Triple H not get any medical help, but he also had to wrestle Brock Lesnar for 24 minutes in a no-holds-barred match. Thankfully, Triple H was okay, but that must have been a brutal night. Another WWE legend that is known for making spectacular entrances is The Undertaker. Unfortunately though, the dead man has nearly been killed by his own entrance a couple of times. In 1998, the Phenom was standing right outside of the ring when a blast of fire shot out from the ring post. Luckily, Undertaker wasn't badly hurt, but this other accident was much more serious. At the 2010 Elimination Chamber, The Undertaker got engulfed in flames during his entrance, forcing him to run to the ring to save his life. What makes this accident so frustrating is that 2 weeks prior, The Undertaker had warned the guy in charge of WWE's pyro that the flames were getting too close. The pyro guy didn't listen, and the Phenom got seriously injured because of it. The Undertaker was planning on wearing his sleeveless attire, but chose to wear his full-body trench coat instead. The WWE legend also decided to dump a bottle of water on his head before going out, because he knew that he was going to spend 20 minutes in the chamber pod before he entered into the match. Had the Phenom not done these two things, this injury might have been even worse than it was. Needless to say, but WWE fired that pyro guy after this incident. In one of his first matches on the main roster, Sami Zayn took on John Cena for the United States Championship in front of his hometown. This was a big moment for Zayn, but it got put in jeopardy when he dislocated his left shoulder. Of all things, it happened when Sami threw his arms into the air while hyping up the crowd. The shoulder popped back into its socket almost instantly, so the match went on as planned. However, shortly into the match, Cena gave Sami Zayn a back suplex and the shoulder dislocated again. The injury was so bad that the referee even threw up the infamous X sign. Luckily, Sami Zayn was able to continue and finish the match. Usually, wrestlers start bleeding after the match has begun, but AJ Styles got a cut before his opponent had even entered the arena. How did this happen? WWE's cameras didn't catch it, but the fans did. Before walking out, AJ bumped into the side of the WrestleMania 38 set. It must have been kind of sharp because it left a good mark on the Phenomenal One's face. After his classic rivalry with Bret, Stone Cold began feuding with another member of the Hart family, Owen. After squaring off in tag team matches, the two finally went one-on-one at the 1997 SummerSlam. The matchup should have been a classic, but it's most well known for one moment. After competing for about 15 minutes, Owen performed a piledriver, and it was immediately clear that something was wrong. The impact caused Stone Cold to break his neck and suffered temporary paralysis. Owen Hart began taunting the crowd to buy the Texas Rattlesnake some time, and after a minute, that likely felt like an hour, Steve Austin managed to roll up Hart for the win. Thankfully, Stone Cold recovered and went on to become the legend we know today. The 2016 SummerSlam was historic. The Universal Championship was unveiled, and Seth Rollins and Finn Balor got to square off to see who would become the first man to ever hold the title. The match started off alright, but within the first 3 minutes, disaster struck. Seth Rollins pulled Balor to the outside and sent the Demon King flying into the ringside barricade. The impact was so hard that it caused Finn Balor's shoulder to be dislocated, but despite the injury, the Irishman continued to wrestle for another 16 minutes. While Finn did become the inaugural Universal Champion, he unfortunately had to relinquish it the next night in order to undergo shoulder surgery. The Prince returned the following year, but sadly hasn't won a single world title since then. As part of Mabel's infamous main event push in 1995, the King of the Ring winner challenged the WWE Champion Diesel to a match at SummerSlam. The contest itself wasn't great, but was made even worse when King Mabel jumped onto Diesel. The force caused the champion to injure his lower back, and Diesel, or Kevin Nash, would later say he wasn't able to feel his legs. After laying on the mat for a while, the two men were able to get back on their feet and finish the match. According to Nash, after the show was over, WWE was ready to fire Mabel. However, despite being upset, Kevin Nash spoke up and prevented that from happening. In the midst of their love triangle storyline involving Stephanie McMahon, Triple H and Kurt Angle faced off in a triple threat match at SummerSlam, which also included The Rock. The feud was so intense that the Game and the Olympic gold medalists began brawling before the Great One had even made his entrance. The fight eventually made its way to the outside, where Triple H decided to hit Angle with a pedigree on the Spanish announcer's table. The table accidentally gave way before the move was executed, and this caused Kurt to slam his head onto the floor. The Olympian ended up suffering a concussion and was taken to the back. Kurt Angle did return later in the match and would later credit Stephanie McMahon and Triple H for helping him get through it. Unfortunately, the following SummerSlam in 2001 wasn't injury-free either, and ironically, this one involved Stephanie McMahon too. As part of the Invasion storyline, Rhino and Chris Jericho squared off after Y2J insulted the, quote, owner of ECW, Stephanie. During their SummerSlam match, Rhino countered a top rope dive from Jericho with a gore. The impact caused Jericho's head to snap back and collide with the arena floor. It doesn't seem like it was too serious, but the Ayatollah of Rock and Rolla did appear to be a bit dazed and even botched a couple of moves. Luckily for Y2J, he's able to lock in the walls of Jericho and pick up the win. The story of Rick Rude is a really sad one. After roughly 3 years in WWE, Rick Rude joined their competitor, WCW. Unfortunately, it was here that the Ravishing One would end his in-ring career. WCW had a partnership with New Japan Pro Wrestling, which allowed wrestlers from both companies to compete on each other's shows. During one event, Rick Rude took on Sting for the WCW International World Heavyweight Championship. At one point in the match, Sting jumped over the top rope and crashed into Rick Rude on the outside. The ring was on a raised platform, and as he landed, landed, Rude's back hit the edge of the platform. This caused a serious back injury, but somehow Rick Rude managed to finish the match. While Rude did win, his in-ring career was over. However, Rude would continue to be part of wrestling, but in a manager-type role. Even more tragic, about 5 years after suffering a career-ending injury, Rick Rude would lose his life. On April 20th, 1999, Rude passed away due to a drug overdose. Christopher Nowinski got his start in WWE in an interesting way. The guy competed in the first season of the reality show Tough Enough. The show is about normal people who train to become WWE wrestlers, with the winners of the competition earning WWE contracts. While Nowinski didn't win, he would eventually sign with the company and made his debut in 2002. Unfortunately, less than a year later, Nowinski's career ended due to a tragic accident. A spot was planned where Rey Mysterio and Edge would hit Nowinski with missile drop kicks at the same time. However, the timing was off, and Edge landed on top of Christopher Nowinski's head. He began doing more damage to his body and suffered from post-concussion syndrome. Nowinski's matches started suffering because of it, and he eventually decided to end his wrestling career. Sadly, this isn't the only time Edge accidentally ended a fellow wrestler's career. Bret Hart called himself the best there is, the best there was, and the best there ever will be. While it may seem arrogant, the Hitman backed up this claim every time he stepped into the ring. Hart never injured anyone he wrestled against, and actually sometimes saved his opponent from an injury, like when he was wrestling Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania 12. Unfortunately, one mistake abruptly ended Bret Hart's career, and it wasn't even his fault. At WCW's biggest show of the year, Starrcade, the Hitman took on Goldberg in the main event. In the closing moments of the match, Goldberg kicked Bret Hart in the head and accidentally hit him for real. Bret described the kick like getting hit in the head with a hockey stick. Later, Hart was examined by a doctor who said he felt a hole the size of a quarter in the back of Bret Hart's neck. The Hitman didn't know the severity of the injury right away and continued wrestling. However, it didn't take long for Bret Hart to realize that he was suffering from post-concussion syndrome, and he soon retired from in-ring competition. Psycho Sid, or Sid Vicious, was a monster. He was usually the biggest man anytime he was in the ring. Because of his size, Sid mainly used big power moves, and he probably should have just stick to that moveset. However, during WCW's Sin pay-per-view in 2001, people backstage pressured Sid Vicious into doing an aerial move from the middle rope. Sid wasn't comfortable doing it, but agreed to anyways, and it was a big mistake. When he hit the move, Sid landed awkwardly and the impact caused his leg to break. Sid immediately underwent surgery and was later told he would never be able to run again. In the aftermath, Sid had to use a cane just to walk. However, Sid was determined to regain his strength, and he did. In fact, in 2012, he returned to WWE and wrestled one final match for the company. When the Rated R Superstar made his WWE debut in 1998, he took on a man named Jose Estrada. The match had just begun, and Edge performed a suicide senton onto Estrada. However, Edge's leg came crashing down onto his opponent's head. The botched move broke Estrada's neck, and the match ended when he got counted out. While Jose would wrestle a little bit longer, his WWE career ended about a year after the injury. Be prepared to cringe in 3, 2... During a 6-woman tag team match on Raw, Becky Lynch started messing with her opponent, Bianca Belair's hair. As you just saw, it didn't work out well for Becky. Moments after the hair whip, a huge red mark formed on Lynch's stomach. It didn't put Becky Lynch out of action, but that had to hurt. The next time Becky and Bianca would face off in the ring was at WrestleMania 38. Unfortunately, someone suffered a nasty injury during this match too. At one point, it looked like Becky was trying to perform a vertical senton. Something was off, and the only thing that connected was Becky Lynch's boot with Bianca Belair's face. Despite the painful accident, Belair continued the match and ended up winning the Raw Women's Championship. It looked like Bianca was fine, but the next night on Raw, we saw just how extensive Belair's injury was. Her left eye looked terrible, but despite that, Bianca Belair was still in good spirits. Hopefully this doesn't mean that 2022 is cursed, but the very first WWE match of the year had someone getting injured. Cesaro and Ricochet were facing off against Sheamus and Ridge Holland during the Day 1 kickoff show. Only about a minute into the match, and Cesaro flipped Ricochet onto Ridge Holland. Unfortunately, Ricochet's boot landed on Holland's face. Ridge soon tagged out and wasn't seen for the rest of the match. We learned later that the botched move broke Ridge Holland's nose. Thankfully, it wasn't too serious, and Ridge Holland was wrestling again soon. But in a scary coincidence, Ridge would later botch a move that could have ended someone's career. While teaming with Sheamus, Ridge Holland was in a match with Kofi Kingston and Big E. Holland and Big E were fighting on the outside, leading to Ridge hitting E with an overhead belly-to-belly suplex. Big E didn't get high enough, causing his head to land on the floor. It was incredibly scary to see, and the accident caused Big E to break his neck. After getting medical attention, it was thankfully discovered that Big E's spinal cord wasn't injured and he would not need surgery. However, as of right now, E has not wrestled since that match. Drew McIntyre began 2022 by feuding with Happy Corbin and Madcap Moss. Their rivalry went on for a few months and included a match at Elimination Chamber. At the event, McIntyre took on Moss in a Falls Count Anywhere match. Even though they could fight anywhere, the most painful moment of the match actually happened in the ring. The match had only been going on for a few minutes when Drew McIntyre planned Madcap Moss with an Alabama slam. Something went wrong because Madcap landed headfirst on the mat. The most shocking part is that Madcap Moss walked it off and continued the match like the whole thing didn't happen. In his WrestleMania debut, Rick Boogs had the huge honor of being part of the opening match. Boogs teamed up with Shinsuke Nakamura to challenge the SmackDown Tag Team Champions, the Usos. Shinsuke started the match, but after a bit of fighting, tagged out with Rick Boogs. Rick was running wild, but his rampage came to an abrupt stop when his knee suddenly gave out when he lifted both Usos on his back. Rick Boogs quickly tagged out with Nakamura. It turned out that Boogs tore his quadricep and hasn't been in action since the injury. In February 2022, Randy Orton and Matt Riddle found themselves in a tag team match against the Street Profits on Raw. The match was going smoothly until the finish. Montez Ford performed his signature frog splash on Orton, but Ford's position was off and he landed on Randy's shoulder. The Viper was clearly in pain after the botched move, but thankfully it wasn't anything serious. During his last match in WWE, Braun Strowman nearly broke his neck. Thankfully, someone saved him from being paralyzed. To see what happened, watch this video.